You guys are not going to believe this, but the state of Massachusetts just made a congresswoman's husband your landlord for the next 60 years or up to 60 years with $2 billion of your money. And the crazy thing is, this specific congresswoman, her entire career is built on fighting landlords. So this is the way the story goes. You probably don't know what's happening. Maybe you heard a little bit of this on the news, but this is like the underbelly of the story. So for around 100 years, Massachusetts and their courthouses have worked one way. If the state needed one, the state would build it, and the state owns it. And the reason that was, by the way, was because there was a law that was protecting people from signing a lease for longer than 10 years, meaning that if you wanted to put up a courthouse or like a state building, they couldn't exceed that 10-year lease limit. And what that means is that nobody could build a $500 million courthouse and get enough returns on a 10-year lease. It would need to be significantly longer, okay? So they had that stipulation in the law, right? And the math just doesn't work. So essentially, private developers could never own a big piece of these civic buildings because there would never be a return on their investment. Again, the math just won't work. Now, back in November of 2024, in Springfield, Massachusetts, a guy from Mount Vernon, New York, one guy with one registered LLC that I believe he registered in 2023, he was basically looking, in my opinion, for an investment property in Massachusetts, which is fine. He decides to buy 125 Liberty Street. This is in Springfield. He paid $945 million in cash, by the way. There were no banks involved, on roughly a $2.1 to $2.3 million assessed building. 2 months later, in January of 2025, because remember, he bought this at the end of 2024. A state board that I never heard of, most of you probably never heard of it as well, called the Asset Management Board. They hop on a Zoom call and they waive the 10-year lease cap. At least maybe it's temporary, okay? They waive the 10-year lease cap. So again, this was 100 years of the public-owned courthouses gone in an afternoon meeting, which resulted in, for the first time ever, a private company coming in to Massachusetts to own a courthouse and rent it back to us. And that's exactly what's happening. They're going to rent it back to us for 40 years, but they have an option of keeping it for up to an additional 10 years 2 times. So it's up to 60 years. 18 months after that, the state announces the winning site of the $600 million Springfield Courthouse. Guess which parcel they decided on? 125 Liberty Street. The building the guy from New York bought for under $1 million in cash 2 months before the rules change. Now look, this video is not necessarily about this guy, which may be a separate video, but he's like a Powerball winner, right? He's the luckiest man in New England. You know, maybe he was throwing darts at a board or something like that, but if I bought a lottery ticket and the lottery rules changed 2 months later so that my ticket would be a winner, you'd probably have some questions. Moving forward, the land and the building, meaning this guy that bought the land, bought the building, and, you know, they waived this 10-year lease thing. That's just Act 1 of the story. Act 2 is who won the deal. So, out of 9 or 10 other bidders, this is the part that they buried. The winning team calls itself Liberty Junction. The builder, you could guess it. The builder is none other than Suffolk Construction, which is John Fish, who is probably one of the most plugged-in people in Massachusetts and more than likely a billionaire. This is who wins the contract, okay? But the landlord, the actual company that the Commonwealth will be mailing rent checks to until some of you watching this are like dead because it could be up to 60 years, is Delaware LLC, run out of an office in Arlington, Virginia. It's not a Massachusetts company. That's what I'm trying to say. But there are 4 names listed as the principals of Delaware LLC. 2 are developers from Virginia. Let's count them out. The other 2, though, One of them is John Barrows, who is a former Boston City Hall employee. He was a Marty Walsh economic development chief. That's who this guy was. But the fourth name is none other than Conan Harris, the husband of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. So let this sink in for a second here, because here's my opinion. If this was, I'll give Harris the benefit of the doubt. If this was his first rodeo, maybe it's his lucky break. Maybe he got lucky. Good for him. Okay. But my issue with this is that there is a pattern going on. There is a pattern, because I think the pattern is the entire story. Remember, back in 2019, Conan Harris is just a city employee in Boston making around $92,000 or $93,000 a year. He was a public safety advisor. He leaves and he starts a consulting firm. And from that standpoint, from that period of time, that's when every single door has completely opened up for this guy. First of all, his firm lands consulting work with Meet Boston, which is the city's tourism bureau that runs on none other than public money. Then there was more consulting work with Boston's Police Accountability Office. And again, this is city taxpayer money. Then he becomes partners in a development group that gets picked for another winning bid on a 400-unit housing project on former public land in Roxbury with $250 million that's been put towards this project. And this, of course, was greenlit with City Hall's blessing under none other than Mayor Michelle Wu. And now he has a principal stake in a landlord entity collecting rent from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on a courthouse for potentially up to 60 years. That's what's going on here. So again, from a city job to a consulting contract, to another consulting contract, to a public land deal, to a state mega lease. Every single rung on that ladder is public money or public approvals, and this all happened within less than 7 years. Do you see what's going on here? I mean, the crazy thing about this, to me at least, is that Ayanna Pressley, she has built her entire career against like this what her husband is doing, right? She has built her entire national brand on one message, which is like fighting corporate landlords, fighting powerful real estate interests. Housing is a human right, right? Stop putting corporate profits over people's dignity. Those are her words. Those are within some of her bills. And this is her almost entire identity. She goes on TV and rails against the exact type of people who profit off of publicly backed real estate. But now her husband is a principal owner in a Delaware LLC and is going to be a corporate landlord of the government, collecting rent from the taxpayers on a courthouse. Do you see what I'm saying here? Like, these two things just, they're so far apart from each other. It seems like the hypocrisy here is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So how can you campaign against the machine while the machine writes the checks to your house? It doesn't make any sense to me. And now let's talk about the money a little bit here, because that's what they're praying you never do the math on, okay? The original proposal to build this out was, and remember, John Fish and Suffolk Construction won this bid. They were the lowest bid by, I believe, about $7 million. The original bid, to my knowledge, was around $462 million to build. And then the rent runs about $48 million a year. And originally, the rent was supposed to be between 30 to 34. So that number effectively like almost doubled, right? Since the time of the plan to the time of the deal. Okay. Now, if you run the full term of this lease, and if it's, let's say, $48 million a year for 40 years or up to 60, it's almost $2 billion. Okay. It's almost $2 billion for a building that could cost anywhere between $462 million to $600 million that we will never own. Okay. We'll never own it, right? Ever. And when the lease ends, the landlord keeps the courthouse. So like, I understand Suffolk is risking the money up front, right? And the risk versus reward is exponential because even if it's $600 million, they're going to collect upwards of $2 billion. Okay. It doesn't make any sense to me. We are paying 4 times the price of the house, and we're also handing back the keys to that house. Who does this? It doesn't make any sense to me. And by the way, even if like we don't have to pay, we are paying the property taxes on this building. That's what's going on because the government does not pay property taxes on buildings that they own, but they do have to pay, meaning we have to pay on buildings that they rent. Does that make sense? It seems like a bad deal. I understand, by the way, and I'll get into this. I understand that we need a new courthouse. The old courthouse, like 60 people were diagnosed with like potential cancer or ALS. There was mold, there was leaking pipes. I'm not arguing that, right? I'm not arguing that at all. I understand that we need a new courthouse, but needing a new courthouse doesn't explain why every other local developer got shown the door. Even Springfield's own mayor, a Democrat, said that Boston power brokers are telling the city of Springfield what to do. So the question isn't whether this deal was legal or not, because to my knowledge, it is legal. But the question is, if a congresswoman is busy fighting landlords, right? But meanwhile, they're partnering or pseudo partnering with a billionaire builder, and let's say the luckiest guy from New York that initially bought the building, who the hell is running Massachusetts? Everybody is somehow, some way interconnected. And if you are connected politically at all, your family members, your friends, all of these things end up coming into place. All of these contracts end up going to like these political insiders. That's what's going on here. It's a complete mess is what I'm trying to say. This is like beyond levels of nepotism. And to my knowledge, nobody at all from the news has actually covered this. This is why I wanted to talk about this today. This is what I spent the weekend on. So I find it to be completely ridiculous that Conan Harris is somehow, some way winning all of these contracts. I mean, how is this even humanly possible? It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.